And so I see this. You know, many of you may know I've been involved in a case called the Writers case in Oakland. It's 120 African-American men who were subject to various acts of misconduct. We filed this lawsuit, and we were ultimately able to settle the case for a sizable amount of money. But I knew when that case came to my office that it was not about the money. It wasn't about the money. The money would be one thing we were going to get. But many of you, and I know Jim, and I work with him and others, and PY, that bringing a case that can have a profound impact beyond the four corners of the case is probably the most important thing you can do. And so I've been involved in this case now for 9 years. And we've got an independent monitor. We have caused the department to rewrite their policies, to implement those policies, and for the most part have them training taking place. We have not completed it. In fact, part of what I was doing today was meeting with new monitors. But the important part of it is that the case was used as an instrument to bring about social change. And I know that the people who are going to be affected the most are African American men. Sometimes I have women, sometimes I have people of different ethnic groups, but it's the men and the boys who are going to be most traumatically affected. And I have several of those kinds of cases where there's a systematic aspect to the police conduct. Now, many of that, I can do a lot of that as an individual, and I'm happy to be able to do it. I'm pleased that I can do it because I know at this stage of my life there are not a lot of other people who are doing it. And most people who do great work don't deal with the questions of the police. And you just can't imagine the kind of harm that it does to individuals. I had a young man in my office today crying. At one point in time I wrote this book. And the book is called, some of you may have heard it, called Blue versus Black, Let's End the Conflict Between Cops and Minorities. And it was really my effort to bring this attention to others in the written word and setting forth examples of how police engage in extraordinary misconduct and the hurt and the pain it causes. I initially called that book When Grown Men Cry. And there was a title that I've gleaned from cases that I've had when I've seen grown men like myself, who couldn't even imagine crying. But because of the assault to their human dignity and the sense of helplessness and frustration, that they would cry. It is hurtful to see that. Now, the funny part of that is when a book was about to be published and the publishers were sitting around talking about it, they said to me, I think we've got to change this title. And I said, why? Because I don't know if you were having male menopause component or not. I said, well, it's not about me. Yeah. But in the end, I did change, and we did work through Blue versus Black, which turned out to be a more hard-hitting component. But the pain was still there. And that is what we try and deal with. Now, I said about the whole Mel in Black was really 30 years ago. So lo and behold, 30 years later, January 1st, 2009, I read the newspaper, sure enough, in the newspaper we read about this, what appeared to be a shooting. And a young man had died, and it seemed kind of odd to me at the time. I immediately get a call from the newspaper asking me to comment upon it as a commentator. Some of you know that I've done a lot of that. But then, within a very short period of time, the family called me and to look into it and to represent them. And this case, obviously, you know, with the videos and all of that, just turned into a mega case. But it's instructive as what a case can do what a case can do. Because I immediately knew that, given what had happened, that this case is going to be bigger than big. Now, I participated in the Rodney King trial, and that was big at the time, you know, bigger than one can imagine, but it was big, and I got a sense of that. And, you know, but this was different because it didn't appear to have any sense to it. And certainly in the Oakland community, it had not been since Melvin Black where the community was so profoundly outraged. Not only was the community outraged here, but it was outraged around the world. I worked with the district attorney's office to make my witnesses available because I wanted to make sure this case got postured in such a way that it wasn't going to be just a civil case, but there had to be a price to pay when you kill someone under circumstances like this. I also understood, and it has happened in other occasions, where you have a case that has the great opportunity to change the landscape of a particular organization. The Writers case allowed me to do that. The crowd control policy was developed with me and some other lawyers around the April 7th war protest at the Port of Oakland. We developed this wonderful, wonderful crowd control policy that, frankly, I had tried to do 7 years before, but it was black people that were the victims. But when the case became white protesters, then the city was willing to listen, and we were able to get it done. My only insistence in all of that is that we're going to develop this policy, but it's going to also apply to the black people in the community when something happens. And when the Oscar Grant case developed, I was most pleased at how Oakland PD handled the riotous conduct. And they did it in large measure because what we had done before with respect to the crowd control. I saw the former police chief yesterday or 2 days ago. I was taking a deposition in another case, and he and I talked privately how pleased he was that we were able to get the crowd control policy together. And he has now taken that and implemented it in his own department in another city. Likewise, he's taken many of the reforms that we put together in the Writers case to his city and used it as a format to ultimately curtail, to manage, and to be instructive to police officers, and at the end of the day, to protect the community. So when you get back to the point I wanted to make around BART is that the case, and cases have this, when I hear Latifah talk, that you have this opportunity in certain cases to move the social agenda, and you can do that not necessarily as lawyers, but you can work with the groups that can get it done. And I work with the groups who are meeting before the BART board, instructing them how to present themselves, how to present the kind of issues that they want, help them define those issues. I was doing that so that I wanted to make sure that when this case is over, that the BART board was going to change the police department and move it in a very progressive way. Now what we have found, as a consequence of having an independent group do the audit, and as well as having an outside group look at the department was in shambles. It really was a leaderless department. It had no structure. All of which I could get done in the lawsuit itself. But it's so much better that it came about as a social movement, and one that I was able to help construct. And so that can be done as lawyers.